Hello, I'm going to talk to you today on the request of some of my clients about anxiety. I know I've talked about it already, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in order to fulfill a request. So I want to think a bit about what is anxiety and what is the advantage of anxiety and how can it be kept under control and how can it be kept in a measured sense. And I'm interested in the idea that anxiety is spiking for pretty much the whole population of the world that knows anything about the coronavirus. And so, gosh, if you're a person who's got an anxiety disorder, there's a bit of competition for who's the most anxious at the moment and what the things are that we're the most anxious about. But in the end, I think that it's worth coming to terms with the fact that anxiety is a normal emotional feeling. It's an extension of worry. And so it's normal. It's as normal as feeling happy, as feeling sad, as feeling in love, as feeling like you hate something. It's a part and parcel of it. It's just that in your particular experience, it's become amplified and it's dominant. And it has this capacity to take over your brain. Now, that usually happens as a result of either being in difficult situations where you've had to learn how to look after yourself without all the skills, or it could be happening because you've had to develop mechanisms that kept you safe in the past but don't serve you very well now. And because we know that our brain learns by repetition, then we know that once we've embedded a habit, like brushing your teeth every morning, it's really hard to break that habit. And you have to put effort into breaking that habit. So if you have a habitually anxious thought process, you have to train yourself to have a less anxious thought process. And the way to do that is that every time you hear yourself or notice yourself having an anxious thought, at the moment that you notice, you stop and you say to yourself, aha, that is an anxious thought. And what's that going to mean to me? It's going to mean that my heart rate goes up, and it's going to mean that my hands get sweaty, and it could mean that my breathing gets difficult. It could completely immobilize me. But it's the thought, it's an anxious thought, and you have the power to replace it, to overlay it, so to speak, with a reframed, less anxious thought, more positive thought. And if you give yourself the opportunity to do that, and you can do that repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly, eventually you can retrain your brain. So knowing that you can retrain your brain is really positive because it means that there's always a way out. Knowing that anxious reactions quite often are the result of earlier experiences that aren't even relevant to today, but they were the experiences whereby you learned the skills that you trained yourself to do that were the ones that associate with the anxiety. So one of the things to do is to take a good look at your relationship with anxiety. How attached are you to the drama and the kind of like the play out of what happens when when anxiety kicks in? And work out how does that balance with your relationship with your other emotions, with anger, with fury, with peacefulness, with happiness, with love, with, I'm trying to think of some other emotional expressions, with patience, with work ethic. How does it impact on all of those? Because if we can't let go of the relationship with the anxiety, what we end up doing is we do ourselves out of having the opportunity for relationship with other emotions. And very often the anxiety surfaces because the potential for having to deal with real emotions, other emotions, ones that we've managed to suppress and not have to deal with because we've managed to make our anxiety big, they're threatening to surface, they're threatening to come through, and the anxiety that is like the umbrella over all of it is what keeps us from having to have that healthy relationship with other emotions. So that's a little theory for me that's worth investigating possibly. And also, and I'm going to add this as a PDF on the end, there's a nice method for looking at your anxiety in terms of ways that you can deal with it, and you may or may not have come across this. It's called the apple approach. So the first step of the apple, it's basically an acronym of the word apple. So the first letter being A, and the first step being awareness. So the awareness is, oh, I'm feeling anxious about this, or I'm having anxious thoughts about this, because it's not you that's anxious. It's not me, the anxious person. It's the thoughts coming out of my head. So take a stop, take a pause. That's what the P is for, pause. The second P is for pull back, step back. So that means step out of the emotion of the situation. Try and become an objective observer of the situation, and see it for what it is. And then the next step is the letting go. So the L of apple is to let go. Let go of the emotion that's attached to the situation. Look at the situation for what it is and let it go. And oftentimes when you give yourself the opportunity to explore like that, you'll discover that you don't need to be quite as attached to it as you were. And then finally explore it. So explore, why did I get in a state about it? What was being triggered in me? What did this remind me of from my previous experiences that was the thing that triggered me into having that anxious moment? And as you explore that and come to familiarise yourself with what those triggers are, then you have some grounds to go back to for work. But in the moment, you've stopped the process. And the more you practice that approach, that apple approach, then the more fortunate you'll be, because the more trained your brain will become. And then the experiences of anxiety in time, with practice, will lower. And so that's all for today. I finally want to just say to you, be kind and be patient, both with yourself and with the people around you. And if you have any other topics that you would like me to speak on, please let me know. Thank you.